Okay, welcome and thank you for coming. I'm Frank Massano, and I am a member of the National Press Club's Newsmaker Committee with Bracewell Giuliani. I'm with Bracewell Giuliani, and I worked with these guys a year or so ago on energy efficiency Newsmaker, and we did such a good job that they wanted us to come back and do another one. So we're here today to talk about a very interesting topic. Which a lot of us don't think about, I think, in general, but is a very, very important topic to how we function. And basically, it's on the growing threat of counterfeit products from pharmaceuticals to electronics. And we have an expert panel with us here today from government, from industry, and I'm going to turn it over to Kevin McLean, the Vice President of Global Marketing for Eaton, who is going to introduce that panel. We'll have some opening presentations, and then we'll come back for Q&A. So, Kevin,
Great.
Welcome.
Thank you, Frank. Well, good morning, everyone. As Frank said, my name's Kevin McLean, and I'm Senior Vice President of Global Marketing for Eaton's electrical sector. And it's my pleasure to welcome all of you here this morning to join us. June is National Safety Month, and we thought that there would be no better time to heighten the awareness of counterfeiting than this particular month. As most of you know, counterfeiting poses significant threats to businesses and our economy. It costs jobs and results in millions of dollars in lost revenue annually. But the public is less aware that some illegal counterfeit products can actually injure and kill people. This is particularly true with counterfeit electrical products, and as you will learn today, also pharmaceuticals. Today, we want to highlight the importance not only of awareness, but of the need for collaboration between industry, governments, and law enforcement agencies. So it's our privilege to bring together leaders from each of these areas to discuss the dangers of counterfeiting and more effective ways to address the issues. So I'd like to do a real brief introduction of our panelists. So starting to my far right is Tom Grace. Tom is the manager of anti-counterfeiting initiatives for Eaton Corporation's electrical sector. Tom is currently the anti-counterfeiting and brand protection manager for the America's electrical sector. He's also a member of Eaton's Global Anti-Counterfeit Task Force. Tom is actively engaged with federal agencies and local law enforcement and has conducted anti-counterfeit training at most of the major U.S. ports. Tom is also engaged with industry associations such as Underwriters Laboratory, the Canadian Standards Association, National Association of Electrical Distributors, and National Electrical Manufacturers Association. In the last 4 years, he's identified nearly 7,500 counterfeit molded case circuit breakers in the U.S. marketplace, valued at more than $20 million. To my left is Patrick Ford. Patrick was with the FBI for 14 and a half years and has been with Pfizer for the past 6 years. His responsibilities include product integrity issues, managing anti-counterfeiting initiatives, and investigations involving Pfizer products and physical security throughout the North and South America. And to my immediate right is William Ross. William is Unit Chief with the Department of Homeland Security's U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Homeland Security Investigations in Washington, D.C. Mr. Ross has been the Unit Chief overseeing the Field Support Unit at the National Intellectual Property Rights Coordination Center since February 2011. Prior to his assignment to HSI headquarters, Mr. Ross served for 4 years as Section Chief at the ICE Academy at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Brunswick, Georgia. Mr. Ross served as a Section Chief overseeing the basic training of all HSI special agents. Additionally, Mr. Ross developed and supervised the advanced commercial fraud training for this program. Mr. Ross began his career as a U.S. Customs Service special agent. He's conducted numerous criminal investigations involving IPR, commercial fraud, money laundering, and narcotics smuggling. Before we begin the panel discussion, I did want to educate you a little bit about Eaton Corporation and what we do. Eaton is a leading diversified power management company. we help the world use electrical, fluid, and mechanical power in a more reliable, efficient, and safe way. And that emphasis on safety is why we're here today. As head of global marketing, it's my job to expand awareness of key safety issues and initiatives. Our global footprint enables us to provide power management and sustainability solutions locally and across the globe. We design, engineer, support, and maintain the smartest and most innovative power management solutions for nearly every application. At Eaton, we design our products to be compliant with and many times vastly exceed the respected standards and certifications, ensuring our global technologies are effective and safe. Our engineers are recognized as leaders and innovators, and as such, they regularly work closely with standards organizations and share their expertise in standards development. With innovation centers around the world, we are continually researching the latest advancements to make power systems reliable, cost, and energy efficient. Eaton's committed to being a leader in the fight against counterfeit products. We have global anti-counterfeit task forces. We are heavily engaged in industry-focused outreach and media awareness. We conduct regular customer training. We partner with and educate law enforcement on the detection and danger of counterfeit electrical products. We work diligently with Customs and Border Patrol on training and identification initiatives. And our platforms and complete descriptions can always be found on our website, www.eaton.com/counterfeit. And with that, I'd like to now turn it over to our panelists, and we'll start with Bill Ross.
Excuse me just one second. Let me get this. Okay. Good morning. I want to say thanks to Eaton and to the National Press Club for inviting me to participate this morning in this event. As Mr. McLean said, my name is William Ross. I currently serve as the Unit Chief for U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement at the National Intellectual Property Rights Coordination Center. That's a mouthful, so I'm just going to call it the IPR Center for the rest of my time up here. I began my career in 1987 as an agent with U.S. Customs Service, and over the years, from very early on, I worked many IPR cases. 20 years ago, IPR, we were looking at local and low-tech. What that means is what you would find as stuff made in somebody's garage, or perhaps they had a small warehouse that they would print T-shirts or make the counterfeit bags that people see so much about. Not very high-tech. We called them one-milers because you could tell from a mile away that they were counterfeit. There was no doubt about it. Occasionally, you'd find a container coming into the country from abroad, but most of it was domestically produced and sold at local swap meets, flea markets, or, if you were in New York, you go down to Canal Street, which you can still do today, and buy pretty much whatever you want. Bags, T-shirts, watches. We didn't see a lot of health and safety issues. I used to joke the only health and safety issue with buying a counterfeit handbag was if you bought it for your wife and gave it to her as a present. You move forward 20 years, and it's changed. Dedicated in July 2008, the ISLED National Intellectual Property Rights Coordination Center currently stands at the forefront of the U.S. government's response to global IP theft. Using a task force concept, the IPR Center uses the expertise of 19 member agencies, including Interpol, the Government of Mexico, and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, to share information, develop initiatives, coordinate enforcement actions, and conduct investigations related strictly to IP theft. We have three prongs that we talk about at the IPR Center. Number one is protecting the health and safety of the U.S. consumer. Number two is protecting our warfighters. That's looking at counterfeit merchandise going into our military supply chain. And then third is protecting the U.S. economy. Statistically, if you look at the trends, in fiscal year 2010, we saw a 34% increase in IPR seizures. However, during the same time, we saw a decrease in the domestic value of seized goods by 27%. We account this to the fact that there has been an increase in the amount of high volume but low value express consignment and mail seizures, resulting in part from the continued growth of the internet and the sale of counterfeit pharmaceuticals and other violative merchandise. China continues to be our primary source country, as it has been for the past 10 years, and accounts for over 60% of the seizures which we make coming into the U.S. Why do we care about this merchandise? We call it health and safety. That's the category it falls into. But in reality, it can come down to life and death. The things that we're showing up here, these are just some samples of stuff that we have seized with my agency over the past year or so, can mean life and death, whether it's pharmaceuticals, your circuit breakers, counterfeit power cords. All of that stuff can have a real impact on your life. What are some of the challenges we in law enforcement face in this day? Well, the biggest challenge, quite honestly, is sometimes the internet. While the internet makes our lives much more convenient, 20 years ago, people didn't have access to what we have now. Now, everybody has the internet attached to their hips with their BlackBerries, iPhones, or whatever they use. The internet enables these manufacturers to sell infringing products to customers around the world. Offenders are creating websites that appear legitimate. I'll show you some here in just a moment. They're deceiving the consumers into purchasing these goods. And quite honestly, you can sit in your living room, never leave, and order pretty much anything you want this day and age. I have a couple of sites here I just wanted to show you. These are found very easily. Go to any search engine and type in whatever your favorite drug is or whatever product you're looking for, and you'll pull up dozens, hundreds of these type sites. To the average consumer, it looks pretty good. It's pretty high tech. They have various links, and in most sites, if you click on the links, it brings up the other page. They have nice pictures. But if you look a little bit closer at what they're offering, this, for example, if you'll notice kind of in the middle, they're offering the Viagra and Cialis pack. Now, for those of you who don't know, Viagra and Cialis are two separate drugs made by two separate companies. I checked with Mr. Ford yesterday, and Pfizer is not marketing with their competitors to sell both of these together. So that's what we call in law enforcement a clue. You also notice they offer female Viagra. That's not a product that exists. Now, we laugh about what they call the, these drugs, the lifestyle drugs. But if you look down the side, they sell everything. They sell cancer medications, heart medications, blood pressure. If you need it, you can find it on these sites. And if you need these prescriptions and these drugs to stay alive, you want to know that what you're getting is what you're really looking for. So the internet is really a challenge because it has made working these cases kind of the Wild West. Another issue, in recent years, the supply of infringing goods has shifted from the lower profit secondary market, where consumers know that they're purchasing a counterfeit item, to the primary market, where consumers are deceived into believing they're purchasing the genuine product. Again, if you go to these websites, if you don't really do your homework, it's believable that you're getting the real thing here. The same thing with circuit breakers, with power cords. You don't think about that. You don't know what to check for. Another challenge we have is the complexity of the people involved in this crime anymore. It's no longer, the mom and pop organizations. If you look at the definition, the Department of Justice definition of organized crime, technically these groups may not meet that definition. But my thought is if I can sit in my living room, go to a website that may be hosted in the Netherlands, order pharmaceuticals that are made in India, shipped through Israel, and then my money's going back to Russia, that's pretty organized. You just don't wake up one morning and set that up. So these are the type groups we're dealing with. We deal with targets that are extraterritorial. That means they're not here in the United States. As an agent, I like to put people in jail. That's the best discouragement from doing something illegal. But if they're in a foreign country, we may or may not be able to do that. So how do we succeed with the challenges that we have? The model at the IPR Center, and what we've been very successful with, is cooperation. Cooperation between the public, government sectors, and cooperation between the private sectors, the gentleman sitting right up here. Some of the things that we have working right now, We have the National Cyber Forensics and Training Alliance, which is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The NCFTA, its function is to be a conduit between private industry and law enforcement, and their mission is to identify and try to neutralize, cybercrime. Just this fiscal year, my agency, ICE, has received funding to put 2 agents out there full-time to act as liaisons to work specifically with those 2 with the Counterfeit Pharmaceutical Fraud Initiative. We work with groups like ASOP, the Alliance for Safe Online Pharmacies. These are private sector groups that come to us. They provide us, they educate us with what's the new trends. They share information with us. They provide us with leads, and they work very closely with us. We also work very closely on the government side with the White House Intellectual Property Enforcement Coordinator, the IPEC. This office sits underneath the Office of the Vice President. And the job of the IPEC is to identify and remedy policy and legislative issues dealing with counterfeit issues. Last but definitely not least, we partner with the pharmaceutical industries. We partner with the Eatons. Any industry that has a stake in this fight, we invite them, and most of them do come to the IPR Center. We share information back and forth. They provide us with expertise if we need it. They provide us with leads, and they assist us with both our criminal investigations and our national initiatives. We could not be successful without this partnership. We hope through the continued efforts and partnerships that we have established and will continue to establish that we can continue to move forward in the fight against the sale of counterfeit and substandard products. Thank you for your time.
This is the biggest test, switching between. Good morning. I'd also like to thank the National Press Club at Eaton for this opportunity to talk about counterfeit pharmaceuticals. My name is Pat Ford. I'm the Senior Director for Pfizer for North and South America. And my job is to catch criminals counterfeiting Pfizer's products and refer them to law enforcement, people like Agent Ross from the IPR Center. What is it that really is counterfeit pharmaceuticals? A counterfeiter really just tries to make it look just like a handbag. You know, it can look like a Gucci handbag. They try to make it look like a Lipitor. When you put these side by side, the patients don't really know, and it takes, quite frankly, often our labs to figure out what's in these products. When you're walking down the streets in New York and you see a Gucci bag that only sells for $2,000, and you buy it for $20, the consumer and the seller, there's a meeting of the minds that isn't a real product. Everybody knows that that's not a real product. It doesn't happen like that in the electrical field. It doesn't happen like that in pharmaceuticals. Patients actually think they're buying authentic product, but at a reduced price. If they knew that Lipitor, counterfeit Lipitor, wasn't going to help them, they wouldn't buy it. So there's a meeting of the minds. It's a real fraud. Patients are harmed by these products. What have we found to date? Well, this isn't a lifestyle problem. This isn't just a Viagra issue. We've found over 44 different products of Pfizer products being counterfeited, some of which are up here. For instance, Aricept was an Alzheimer's medication with little or no active pharmaceutical ingredients. So the therapeutic benefit that you're supposed to get to help maintain memory and body functions, it's not there. Once you lose it, it's gone. Once you get back to real Aricept, you don't get back what you've lost while you were taking a counterfeit pharmaceutical. Lipitor for cholesterol. Again, Norvasc for high blood pressure. A silent killer with no API truly becomes a silent killer. I don't think anybody would knowingly take a product that wasn't going to help them or believed to help them. Prevnar 13, vaccinations for children. We've seen counterfeit pharmaceuticals with little or not the correct vaccinations for children. And then you wonder, what have they taken? And it's very difficult to figure that out. So what type of mindset? These are just, that do this. These are just criminals. They're strictly in it to deceive a patient and sell a product. And they sell anything. It doesn't have to be the #1 most expensive product out there, like a cancer medication that maybe just hit the market, like Sutent. It can be something that's been off patent and sells for a very low price and practically pennies on the dollar. Viagra, of course, no API, subpotent, super potent, too much API, which again doesn't help a patient at all. It doesn't regulate what they're supposed to do and what the therapeutic benefit was supposed to be. And Xanax for anxiety. What do these places look like? I think a picture's worth 1,000 words. And these are typical pictures. These are not the worst of the worst. These are not, gee, how bad can Pat show this? This is what it looks like. This is atypical, this is an antibiotic recycling the bottles that the authentic product comes in. They refill it with saline. And, first they start with one tub, then it gets a little cleaner, I suppose. But it's not the type of conditions, and it's not the type of people you want making these products and selling them and giving them to your children. You think you're giving your child an antibiotic for their ear infection, and it's not. Cytotec, which is a mild analgesic in Colombia. This is a packaging operation. I used to show pictures, and I don't this time, side by side. What does Pfizer's look like? What does a typical good manufacturing process look like? I assure you, I don't think there's a need for that when you see these. I don't see the need. Pakistan, Lipitor. And these get shipped all over the world. Generally, the products in South America that are being made are for the South American market, but they do make their way up, being carried by in luggage or whatever up to North America. Pakistan, it finds its way all over the world. China, guaranteed it finds itself all over the world. This is counterfeit Viagra, with fans and again, this is not what a process should look like. This is a coating for paint. What they do is they just make it look good. Look, it just has to look good. It doesn't have to work. They don't care about that. That's not what they're in this for. I assure you that we don't typically make a paste and then put it in a tube, and that's not how it's made. And what they do is they put it in, they press it, and they dry it. And then they package it, and they sell it all over the world. Counterfeit Norvasc in Canada. This was actually in a legitimate supply chain. This was a pharmacist purchasing counterfeit Norvasc. In this case, it was had little or no active pharmaceutical ingredient in it. So the patients that were taking it, their blood pressures were going up. Generally, they're sick already. When we discovered this, we reported to the RCMP. They went out and they actually identified patients. They looked at the distribution from the pharmacy itself. They found 11 patients that had died in the time frame that he was purchasing this. The coroner, when he looked at those cases, couldn't rule out in a few of those that the counterfeit Norvasc didn't kill the patient. Breaches in the legitimate supply chain. This is where counterfeiters want to get their product. So I think there's 21 or 22 different products over on the left-hand side, and again, it's more than just Viagra problem. These are just Pfizer products. I don't put up anyone else's. I'm sure there's other. The list could be much longer, but this is products being found in the pharmacies. That's not the big issue. That's not the real issue for our patients here in the United States, though. It's the online pharmacy sales. It's the online pharmacy sales that consumers and patients go online, and they look at a site like this. This is an actual site. This is from this was Mr. Stempler. He still hasn't been convicted that I'm aware of. And this is the quintessential case that anyone will ask you. We want to find the body. Here's the body. Tons and tons. No, I wouldn't say tons. Kilos, because it was the products were found outside the United States, but hundreds of kilos of counterfeit product, pallet loads of many different manufacturers being shipped all over the United States. He was telling his patients or they patients that we source our product from Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, and then he was just quite frankly sourcing from China and packaging them up and sending them in the mail from the UK. Patients, no idea. Who are they? Who's actually counterfeiting these products? What do the people look like? I mean, that's the interesting part. On the left is a Paralympic coach for Canada. He was arrested in Washington State, picking up counterfeit Viagra for his son and selling it. There's an undercover buy that we had hand-to-hand with a gentleman from Israel that was arrested. And again, on the left-hand side from Maryland, Mr. Dogmash. We have people from Colombia. And Kevin Zhu, a very good ICE case out of Houston, was trying to get this into the United States supply chain. He was packaging a list of about 20 different drugs to get them into the U.S. supply chain. He actually was responsible for recalls in the U.K. because they did make it to the supply chain. So it's not a typical criminal. It can change. A lot of them have very long criminal records, but it's also people who it's not okay. You know, my message is it's not okay to sell counterfeit pharmaceuticals, and people who are unwitting, like the Paralympic champion, you know, that don't realize the dangers of what's going on. And what can be done? In my view, we need to enhance the penalties. This is a heinous crime. You're hurting people. This is a health and safety issue. Regulate online sales. I don't know how online pharmacies operate online. You go to your local pharmacy at CVS, they have rules, regulations, records, and inspection. Online, it's anonymity is my friend. I was the Internet Fraud Program Manager for the FBI for 3 years, and it hasn't changed when I was in the FBI. There's still a lot of anonymity behind the internet, and something like this, when you're buying a pharmaceutical and you need a trusted partner in the healthcare profession, that's not what this is. It's not established. Change regulations that impede interdiction efforts. You know, when CBP sees this, they can't call us with the information. There's regulations that that impede them to call us to identify the product as being counterfeit or real. So we need to change that so that they can encourage them to do it. Finally, these are direct-to-patient sales. So you see hundreds and hundreds of these packages coming into the United States. Each one of those packages require about four hours of paperwork. Let's bundle them all together, all 50, 100, and you do one seizure for 4 hours. And it would encourage more seizures. And the last one, of course, is awareness. Healthcare professionals, judges, legislators, and patients need to be aware that this does exist. And today's part of that. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
That's better. Hi, my name's Tom Grace. I'm with Eaton Corporation. I'm in charge of anti-counterfeiting and brand protection. Again, I'd also like to thank the Press Club here for hosting this event. And thank you for joining us today as we try to create a dialogue to consumers to warn them of the dangers of electrical safety products such as Eaton manufactures. Many of the products that Eaton manufacturers are intended to safely and efficiently manage electrical power. Things we rely on every day, like the light switch when the lights come on, the technology is behind that is protecting our homes and our safety. Additionally, these circuit breakers might also provide additional levels of safety, such as ground fault circuit breakers that are used in wet applications, or arc fault circuit breakers that are used in applications where damaged wiring, frayed wiring could also be the cause of electrical fires. It's these products that we're concerned about the safety of our customers, and their reliability is paramount. Counterfeit consumer safety products and critical technologies are a threat to our personal safety and could have catastrophic effects should they fail. Counterfeit products also have a financial impact on the economy, affecting jobs, revenue, and brand identity. Photo shown here in the photo is actually a test of a residential circuit breaker, much like Bill Ross has here shown here, being tested and its potential failure, which in this case would clearly cause a fire in your home. As Bill pointed out earlier, seizures have been going up while the value has been going down. In the case of electrical safety products, the value has actually been going up, with more than 19% of those seized being electrical products of the safety and security counterfeit seized. In the U.S., the sale of these counterfeit products is estimated to be $200 to $250 billion annually, with the MSRP value seized by customs at $1.4 billion. These losses are also attributed to an estimated 750,000 jobs annually from companies who lose revenues that would normally be provided by these counterfeit products. So why is Eaton the target of counterfeit products? Highly recognized brands, high volume, low cost products, high demand items, a large installed base, a complex, loosely controlled supply and distribution chain, and internet access to customers. So what does that mean? As the world develops, we see a continued trend for additional electrical infrastructure being built throughout the world, and the supply of those coming from these counterfeiters. And as Bill pointed out earlier, the access to these customers through the internet is an easy avenue for counterfeiters to present their goods. And I think we've all recognized pharmaceuticals or electricals, all recognized brands are being counterfeited. Now, as Kevin pointed out earlier, Eaton works closely with the certification industry in order to establish a safe, reliable thresholds, performance levels that our products should meet. Then those products receive those markings. So people here are probably more familiar with UL as a mark of safety for electrical products. Our plants and facilities, when we manufacture products, are also scrutinized by UL on a regular basis to ensure that those products continue to meet those performance requirements to keep you safe. Counterfeit products also bear these marks, but unfortunately their factories are not maintained in a way that you would expect, and similar to what Bill pointed out earlier, tend to be more like sweatshops and substandard type of manufacture. Now, we do collaborate quite frequently with industry associations and law enforcement. We only find success in stopping counterfeiting through the collaboration with these companies. Pfizer, a pharmaceutical company, and Eaton Electrical Company would seem unlikely partners in such a crime or an activity. But it's really required to share this knowledge of successes and techniques that we can use to communicate to customs so they can better detect products, but also to our own investigators so we can better find and stop products at their sources. We also work closely with industry associations such as NEMA, the National Electrical Manufacturers Association, who actually allow competitors in a particular market, such as electrical, to work together towards a common goal of stopping counterfeiting. Pictured here is, again, a typical facility where the counterfeit products are being assembled. It is not the factory that you would expect to find, nor the test equipment that you would expect to have verifying the performance of those products. So what is Eaton continuing to do to prevent counterfeiting and to identify counterfeiting? We're going to continue to build our high-performance, high-quality products at a competitive price with technologies to help detect counterfeit products. We're going to assure our customers that if they go through their authorized reselling channels using licensed contractors, that they're going to end up with a genuine product. When they go outside of those realms, such as eBay or other online sites, you might find yourself with a suspect or counterfeit product. We actively monitor these markets. These pictures are actually from our own investigations in many parts of the world, including the Middle East, China, and Africa, where we do our own raids and seizures every month. From hundreds to over 100,000 units are seized every single month during these investigations. Now, fortunately, most of them have not made it into the shores, but the CPSC has issued a number of product recalls regarding residential circuit breakers similar to the ones here, enough to affect probably 40,000 homes if they're allowed to actually get into the marketplace. So you saw the original picture, big flash fire, 40,000 potential failures in homes in the U.S. And finally, what we'd like to see with government, now while we work closely with government, we have done a number of trainings at the ports. Last week we spent a number of time with a UL-sponsored conference with Homeland Security, with Customs and Border Protection, with Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, and Eaton is actually working a case right now with the FBI with a domestic counterfeiting case. We'd still like to see policies that better protect intellectual property rights holders. We'd like to have a more engagement. We'd like to have a better dialogue with law enforcement when it comes to identifying counterfeit products as they come into our shores. I've actually found a number of cases where large shipments, 8 pallets, 3,500 pieces, come in from ports that we have not identified as our own import ports that have counterfeit marks that are being sold into the U.S. marketplace. So better help customs detect these products at the ports. I would like to see stronger deterrent penalties for those found trading in counterfeits. Today, counterfeits are used instead of drugs. They don't carry the same penalties. A container or a pallet of marijuana or a kilo of cocaine has prison time, large fines. Counterfeit products, they seize the products. It could be maybe a light sentence, if any, small fines. It's a common practice for gangs and other local crime to use counterfeit products in order to raise revenues. And finally, just build on initiatives from the government that help us with the credibility that electrical products, pharmaceutical products, really do pose a safety threat to consumers. We've shown how these products fail. We've shown the potential for fire. And we would like to have the support of the government in order to lend more credibility when we're speaking to our consumer base. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're going to take a few questions here now for the remaining time. And remember, please identify yourself before so the panelists know who's asking the question. One note, we do, this is the National Press Club, so we do prefer and give priority to members of the press and members of the press club. So if feel free to raise your hand and ask your question to whoever, and they're just going to answer from the tables. So I will start with the question first as the moderator's prerogative, and then we'll move on. Yesterday there was a congressional hearing, and Congress is getting more and more interested in this. And perhaps, Bill, you'll want to start with this. What can Congress do? How much more aggressive can they get? And would you welcome their interest? Is there funding for it, or are they? Do they need to get more funding for it?
Well, of course, we always welcome congressional interest. From the funding perspective, if they're interested, it usually means more money for us, which helps us do our job better. From a legislative perspective, we at the IPR Center don't really get into legislation and policy. We defer that to the IPEC and other entities within the government. Our job is to enforce the laws. So we enforce what we have now. If new laws come into being, we'll enforce those. If not, we'll continue to move forward with what we have now. But yes, it's always good, or I won't say always, but most of the time it's good to have congressional scrutiny because that brings us more resources and a better ability to do our job.
I was fortunate enough to see most of that yesterday, but I think any legislation that improves the rights to the IP holder, that increases penalties to those that violate IP rights, and is particularly for health and safety in the pharmaceutical field, as well as perhaps a legislative fix for, and I've been told, and I'm a CPA, I'm not an attorney. I've been told that a legislative fix for the seizure, to make it simpler to pass information to the rights holders pre-seizure would be the quickest fix. And I've heard that from the government, and I've heard that from other private industry. So those areas would be great. And finally, something to regulate online pharmacies so that patients are receiving authentic product. And I do want to say there are verified internet pharmacy practice sites, VIP sites, and they're about 15 or 16. It fluctuates. Though there is a safe place to buy your pharmaceuticals online, and from a VIPS regulated site, and you can find them through the National Association Board of Pharmacy. those are safe. That is a safe place, and that's where I would encourage patients to buy their pharmaceuticals.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I would say we encourage the changes in the legislation. Currently, brand holders are not really engaged. They can't develop the dialogue with customs agents because of the laws that take place for trade secrets. So we aren't necessarily engaged with the customs or law enforcement in the detection and seizure of these products. So any changes in those policies that we can be engaged and let the private sector again help police our own products be beneficial.
Good. Go ahead.
Eugene Bradman, I'm a member of the National.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. Hold on. We do have a microphone because this is being recorded, so go ahead.
Eugene Bradman, I'm a member of the National Press Club. What role, if any, I ask this of any or all of you, what role, if any, does the World Intellectual Property Organization play in your efforts?
They provide a key role, and we actually look for them to provide political pressure, especially in China and other places where we're seeing the intellectual property rights not enforced as they could be. But we rely on the WIPO to move policy forward in protecting intellectual property rights.
I would agree with I mean, I think it is to raise the awareness, to have a fair playing field globally for intellectual property. Intellectual property is just not created in the United States. It's created globally. So to have it treated similarly and protected on a global basis and respected is a good thing. And I think that's one of the bases behind WIPO. So.
Is that something you guys focus on?
I would just say we fully support. We've found with some of our initiatives that if we can get more than just the United States involved, we use organizations like that in the World Customs Organization to get multiple countries involved with these initiatives and blitzes and things of that nature. And some of ours have had up to 40 countries participating. So anytime we can make the problem bigger and global, it's beneficial for us.
More questions? Go ahead.
I'm Gene Eckhart with NEMA, National Electrical Manufacturers Association, and we have worked with Tom and many NEMA members. And this question is actually directed to Mr. Ross. And when you look at the number of cases that are being engaged, how many actually wind up in the courts? Is there a percentage that actually get to the courts?
That would vary. By our offices, at the IPR Center, we're more of a coordination. We don't work a lot of cases out of here, but we have 26 what we call SAC office, Special Agent in Charge offices. And what you can get prosecuted a lot of time comes down to where you're at. If you're in a smaller office, your chances of getting less significant cases prosecuted are better than if you're in a New York City or in LA. I don't have an actual percentage, but I would say it varies by where you're at. We have to work with the U.S. Attorney's Office, so how aggressive are they and how supportive are they? We push everything we can, and we're being very successful. The hardest case to get prosecuted is always the first one, so once you have a good track record, of course, they're willing to work with you on more cases.
Go ahead.
Yes,
hold on
Miles
one
Moore.
second.
Sorry. Miles Moore, Rubber and Plastics News. This is for Mr. McLean and Mr. Grace. And it has to do with Eaton Corporation, which is a very large, obviously a very large corporation. You supply many industries. Do you find that particularly in the automotive sector, is counterfeiting as big a problem there as in the home electrical market? Do you find also that counterfeiting is a problem that pretty much cuts across all your businesses?
I'll take first shot at this, Tom. Both Tom and I are from the electrical sector, so our familiarity is much more on the electrical side of the Eaton's business. But absolutely, it does cut across all of our individual type businesses, particularly in our vehicle business. There's a lot of counterfeiting that does take place, and it's a big issue as well there, both financially, but also safety is an issue as well with vehicle parts. I mean, you don't want to have parts wearing out before they should. So it's absolutely an issue across all of our business. It's a particularly big issue in our electrical sector.
Tom,
Again, there's evidence in the automotive industry of counterfeit brake pads made of compressed wood and not the proper friction materials that are used in brake pads. So you can imagine going down the road with your new brake pads and having them fail in a short period of time, as opposed to when you last replace them. Again, safety products, but they'll counterfeit virtually anything. It's a look-alike product, and that's the important part here. That these circuit breakers look like circuit breakers. On the outside, the plastic is molded very well. The marks are copied very well, but inside the product is not the same. It doesn't have the same electrical materials. It doesn't have the same qualities. It doesn't. In the case of a circuit breaker, it doesn't open when it sees those currents that it should interrupt. In the case of a ground fault breaker, those electronics have been copied with who knows what components, so they're not going to trip if your child drops the hair dryer into the bathtub, or you get into your hot tub and you turn on the lights. You never think about that at night when you're just going to take a dip in the pool. Is that light fixture in there? Is that a counterfeit light fixture? Is it designed and made to the proper specifications to protect you in case there's a fault of some type?
And that kind of leads me to another question that I had, which maybe all of you can address, and that is, what other SIC codes, what other industries really are impacted by this problem, and does the broader swath of industries that are impacted by it really make it easier for you to go to Congress and say, hey, this is a big problem, or raise awareness like you're trying to do? So
I would say any industry that sells an item is a target. If it's popular, if people want to buy it, counterfeiters are going to counterfeit it and try to sell it for cheaper. So it's across the board. It's not just these two industries, it's everything.
I would agree with Bill with what he said. It's probably easier to think of industries that it doesn't affect. I mean, it affects all industries, as Tom said before. It's look-alike. I mean, they're counterfeiters, they work on making products look on the outside, so it's going to affect every industry, and again, potentially just very, very serious safety concerns.
I've been to many conferences and I've seen speeches from law enforcement. Whether it's shampoo that has bacteria growing in it, or razors that are disposable razors that are manufactured and don't work properly and harm patients. So it affects the product. Even in Pfizer's product that's over the counter is chapstick. I mean, something that sells for $1 and it's counterfeit, and so they'll counterfeit just about anything.
more questions from out here?
Frank,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
The safety category is safety and critical components. And critical components could be electronics, transistors, parts and pieces that might be in aircraft avionics, the military, communications devices, the routers that are in your home that manage the data that you trust that's going across the internet. It could be parts of that, or it could be disrupted or sent to other places. But the aviation industry is probably the one that scares me the most, that there's a portion of counterfeit products entering into aircraft today, from the electronics to the parts and pieces that are supplied to those aircraft. Counterfeit bearings is one of the most recent ones that we've learning about from Department of Customs and Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
Let me ask one last tough question for you guys to address. Okay, and that is, there is always a distinction between patents and generics, and when generics come in and bring prices down and things like that. And some might argue that that this is just part of a whole effort to extend patents and things like that, especially in the pharmaceutical industry for profits, et cetera. How do you address that charge? I mean, clearly there is a safety issue, which is you're stepping up and talking about that issue here. But how do you get over that and distinguish the counterfeits from the generics, the true generics, in that discussion and debate, both from a regulatory perspective and from an industry perspective?
Let me start first by saying that's not my area of expertise, but being Pat, I'll give my opinion. There's a lot of good work that goes into making a pharmaceutical product, a lot of research that goes into bringing a product. And if you look at, for instance, the Pfizer pipeline, there's 800 products in phase 1. I mean, if we could bring 800 products onto the market at the end of the day, that'd be great. But there's a lot of time, effort, money, and research that goes into, I think our expenditure is about $8 billion a year in research. And if we bring 3 products to market in 3 years, that they'd be happy, I think, and most companies would be happy. So you've spent $24 billion just to get 3 products to market. So there is the protection of the intellectual property side of it, where the company needs that period of time, quite frankly, to bring their product to market. Whether it's a song, whether it's a new computer chip, whether it's an Apple iPad, there's intellectual property that encourages development of those, and so you need a period of time to have that protection. A lot of times what you find on the internet is unapproved product. They'll call it a generic, but it's not even, it hasn't approved by anybody. It hasn't been approved by the FDA. It hasn't been, but it puts your defenses down, a patient's defenses down, because they hear the term generic, because generic is a good term, and it is a viable product. But these are unapproved products being sold. The FDA hasn't looked at these. These are just products being sold that are being, again, made by who knows who. But they do put them on the market, and whether or not they work, I can't tell you. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But do they work to the extent that they're supposed to? Have they been inspected by the FDA in the manufacturing process? No. So.
Well, we don't really get into the patent issues or the generic issues. We defer to the rights holders with that. There are civil remedies that they can use to explore those. We look at the counterfeit merchandise, and in conjunction with our partners at FDA, we sometimes get into what we call substandard, which is not a counterfeit, but it's not a product that has been approved or tested or is allowed to sell in the U.S. So those are the kind of 2 areas we focus on. There's a lot of work that goes on the private sector, on the civil side, that we don't feel we need to get involved with. We like to look at the criminal aspect of it. So,
Tom or
Frank, I think it's a good question you asked, and I guess I'd want to make the distinction between what we really were addressing today, which is counterfeit and generic. In our industry, patents do run out, and then the technology becomes available to other companies, and that's just pretty standard, and that's one thing. But what we're talking about is counterfeiting, where people you've seen evidence up there today where individuals, they're not stealing technology necessarily, they're just counterfeiting and putting things out there that will not work, and it really does become a safety issue. So generic, I don't know if fits so well in the electrical industry. Technologies do get adopted by other companies, and that's okay. It's what we're really concerned about, the counterfeiting, and where people are just putting out products that just aren't safe, and it puts people's lives at risk, quite frankly.
Yeah, the National Electrical Code and the certification industry actually doesn't recognize a generic for electrical products. The term we use is called classified. But I have actually run across a case of counterfeit Eaton products being marketed as generic for CH. This was being marketed by a man in Boca Raton, selling knockoff of our circuit breakers into the Costa Rica market along with the load centers. And I actually had the pleasure of actually seizing some of his products while we were doing raids in Wenzhou, China last year. We seized 3,000 of these breakers, and how do we know that they were our breakers? They have our UL file numbers molded into the side. They have our marks on them that represent our UL file numbers and our safety marks that are on the products. They have our black features with tan handles, but again, marketed as a generic. But there is no generic. If you go home tonight and maybe nobody ever notices that their load center, when you open it up, that's that panel inside your home where it trips sometimes when you run a vacuum cleaner and a toaster at the same time. There's actually, it prescribes what products are allowed to go inside of that panel. And you need to stay with that prescription. There are no generics for your electrical products.
Good. Any last questions before we close? Okay, well, I want to thank everybody for coming today. I want to thank our expert panel for the fine job and the fine discussion that we had on an important topic. And they will be available up here for questions after if you have individual questions that you want to ask. And thanks again for coming.